And you got to be careful, because once you've been reading, I have been reading years, I just tendency to see things from the house viewpoint, even though I'm looking at a solar chart. You know, and because you just, it's instinctively, you're going to go looking at those things. Oh, something's in the first house. Well, it probably isn't if it's a solar chart. So
I noticed some astrologers just use the sun sign as the rising sign. I've seen that too.
well, that's what you got a solar chart. That's what it is. When
Right.
sun's rising in the east,
Yeah.
the rising, that's the 6 a.m. generally.
Oh, okay, so that's what you're
That's
talking
what that
about.
is.
Gotcha.
So your charts, when you're doing one that you don't know the time, it'll ask you if it's a sunrise chart. Okay. And that's in the program you have, for example. There's a little box at the top, and if you click on it, then you don't have to put times and stuff in. It just automatically does it that way. You just have to put the location and the date of birth. So let's go back. Let's go back over here, and let's just. I want to show you that you know more than you know. You think you know. If the moon is afflicting Mars, real quick, I'm going to ask everybody just, you know, just at random here. Just what do you think, Maria? Do you think that means?
I would say anger,
Good. What kind of? Towards what? Who?
mother,
Good for you. Good for you. Good for you. And what else was it showed? It shows that there's generally emotional fear of violence, by the way, because you're dealing with the moon, your sense of security. It can be somebody that's real paranoid about violence, some more overcautious, more fearful. The moon is generally it's the crab. It likes to pull in. You know, it's the Cancer sign. So it likes to retreat from anything that's dangerous. Okay. The moon also can be quick emotional anger, though, because it's outbursts, emotional outbursts that are repressed for a long period of time. The moon represses things. Okay, so if you have a Moon Mars square, it could be generally when I see this, it's emotional outbursts that are childlike. Okay, and I say childlike because we're dealing with the moon. It's the infant, the child in you. And a lot of the issues that a person has with the Mars square, or Mars opposing, or Mars semi-square, 45 degrees, some of those issues that are going on in their life are related to the early home life. Generally related also anger towards the mother. It can also be issues that happen in their very early formative years. The moon is the formative years of your life. So when you see these aspects, you know, you're dealing with issues that are deep-seated, unconscious almost, because the moon is the subconscious, the sun is conscious, right? So when we see these issues, we know we're dealing with something. Generally also, people that have this aspect, especially men I'm talking now, men will tend to have a tendency to vent anger towards women a lot. They'll be maybe even very hard to live with that aspect. If you have a guy and he's got that chart, say, oh, you know, there's somebody's got some issues here towards the mother or towards women in general. Okay, depends again. We're dealing with one aspect, but maybe if there's a culmination of things, you can add more to that. Especially Pluto. Pluto's deadly. You see Pluto in a cross with Moon, Mars, and a cross. You know that can be dangerous because Pluto's death. It can be deadly. I've seen it many times in charts. Pluto, Mars, Saturn. Whenever you see those aspects, beware. If it's a man, really be careful. I'm not telling you that, you know, I've seen it. I've just seen it. It can really be dangerous. Okay. Moon, Mars, Saturn aspects. I mean, excuse me. Mars, Pluto, Saturn aspects afflicted all together. It's a very potentially dangerous aspect. So, of course, now you go home and look at your mates. Say,
Smack him in the
Ron said, I better leave home, right? Yeah, I better leave, right? No, I'm just, you know, if you've been dealing with it, and you're dealing with somebody with that, you know, I'd have to look at the whole chart and see the chart, but that is an indicator of something to watch out for. Okay, so let's go to the next aspect, Moon afflicting Saturn on some level. What do you think would be involved in an aspect with Moon Saturn? Christine, what do you got any ideas?
Pessimistic.
Very good. Why? Saturn is looking, Saturn is depression, melancholia, right? Okay, so let's just keep on.
Sad or sadness or...
Emotionally depressed, depression is Saturn. It rules that, okay? It's the moodiness, the melancholia. Remember the figure melancholia? Rodin, I think, beautiful statue. It was depiction of melancholia. That's Saturn, okay? Saturn's energy. And we go periodically in our life, we all go through periods of melancholia. I mean, it's part of life. We have periods where we're feeling more depressed and things look dark and they don't look good. That's all Saturn's energy, okay? And another thing that Saturn does is looks to the what?
Past.
Good for you. Past, that's what we're dealing with, past. Saturn lives in the past. Father Time. Get behind me, Satan, Christ said to Peter. Peter symbolized, if you read my book, you know that. Okay, so get behind me, Satan. That's past. I don't want anything to do with it. Just get behind me. It's no longer relevant in my life. I am here now. I'm in the present moment, right here and now. Christ said, I am and I am and I am. He didn't say, I am, I was, and I will be. I am and I am and I am. That's where we're supposed to be. That's where you're supposed to be. You're all supposed to be here now. The difference between a good student and a poor student is it's simply that. A good student is able to be here now. They're focused on the lesson, the key things in their life right then. A poor student is daydreaming about the future and thinking about the past, worrying about things that are not relevant to his moment. And that's the difference between a good student and a poor. The word knowledge has what in it?
Now.
It has now in it. So to gain knowledge, to be a good student, to be in this class and learn something, you have to be here now. Not thinking about the milk you got to pick up when you leave. You know what I'm saying? That's the distraction, pulls you from the truth.
What about the lessons from the past and the fear of
The future.
repeating the lessons, so that you live in the past, except for you're thinking about the past because you don't want to do that again, and
Right.
you have the fear. Is that all Saturn talking
Yeah,
about?
it's Saturn. And fear is the absence of faith. Perfect love casteth out what? Fear. So the reason we get in a place of fear is the fear of being separated from good. Fear is basically that. That's what it is. I'm going to be separated from good. Whether it's in a relationship, I fear being left alone, being, abandoned like a child from the parents, that fear. That is not the presence of faith at all. It's the absence of something. It's the absence of faith in good, or faith in God, if you would. So we need to cultivate a more positive self-image, first of all. That's the hard part. Most of our fears come from our poor self-image. And our poor self-image comes from your past, things that have happened to you in the past, just what you said. Saturn is called a teacher. He's definitely a teacher. Martha brought that home real well last week and the week before about how her revelations about Saturn and its message. So we need to understand that it's a teacher, but we don't live in that space. We don't stay there. We don't dwell there. We try to stay in the present. It's kind of like the shorter our comprehension of the time in our life, the more powerful we become. By that I mean, if you look at AA, I started to say AAA. If you look at AA, what do they teach? 1 day at a time, right? Not 1 week at a time, 1 month at a time. Take each day at a time. But let's do it even better. Let's say take each moment at a time. And there's a scripture that's really beautiful. It says, choose this day whom thou shalt serve. Choose this day whom thou shalt serve. Good or evil, basically. You make that choice. So we do that by focusing on the now. Saturn tends to be pessimistic. Jupiter is what? Optimistic. Good. Good. We're getting there. So you're going to start reading charts, believe me. You're going to see, I told you in 5 weeks you'll be able to read a chart. You won't be able to do some things, but you'll find that your intuition will kick in. All of a sudden you're going to start getting messages because you're tuned in to that chart. It happens to me all the time. You've watched it. All of a sudden I see more than just an aspect. I see more than just moon afflicting Saturn You know, I may see in a woman's chart, I'll say, oh, you had an abortion or two, you know, because I can see those things in a chart very clearly. And, you know, I don't always speak those things in a group, but if I'm privately reading, I'll say, if you don't mind, if you want me to be truthful and personal, I'll talk to you about your chart. I always try to qualify myself when I do that, because I know I'm going to touch nerves, you know, sensitive issues. Anyway, very often Saturn moon afflictions will bring about that in a woman's chart. Okay, remember, Saturn was what? He was the devourer of all of his children. Okay, and the moon is the mother. So if it's an affliction, you know there's issues there that probably involve more than just the little emotional stuff we're talking about. All right. So, okay, moon to Mercury. My teacher in prison, Percy John Newton, the black man that got me onto astrology and taught me a lot. He said to me something that I never forgot. He said, Mercury moon afflictions are a fool.
Are what?
Can be a fool. Can be a fool, okay? And the reason is because the mind is Mercury and the moon is emotions. And you see somebody that gets real emotional, let's say in playing cards, and you see them screaming and yelling when they're winning, right? They're acting very foolish, you know, or they're in a game and they act that way. Or they're even at they vent that energy often. And I see it when we go to the other night we were out for dinner in a nice restaurant, they had a bar there, and I could hear these guys screaming and hollering. You know, to me that's foolish. You know, I mean, you don't have to make that kind of noise and yell and scream. Just to have a conversation with somebody, which they were with. But that to me is very foolish. And I see that in a lot of charts of Mercury moon afflictions, okay? The mind gets clouded by the emotions and overreacts and overspeaks, too loud, too much emotional outburst, okay? So that's one of the things that happen. Also, when you see the moon, Mercury, whenever I see Mercury, I always think of the brothers, sisters in a chart. A lot of times in your charts I've talked about your brothers, your sisters, and I see something about them, and because maybe Mars is afflicting heavily Mercury in a chart, I may see danger to your brother, sister, or even death, because that stands out in the chart very strong, you know. And some of you have done private work for in here, and you know that I've done that, and I've seen those things in your charts. So what I'm saying to you is that when you're looking at these, you're not just you look at Saturn, you're also thinking about the father. If you got a moon Saturn affliction, Saturn is the rule maker, he's the disciplinarian. It's the father that can be over disciplinarian, you know, discipline. Can be cruel in fact. Saturn can be cold and without feeling. So if you have Saturn and moon afflictions, that's somebody that's got a potential to also be cold emotionally. Because Saturn is cold. Mars is hot, right? So Mars to the moon would give very hot emotional nature. Saturn to the moon will give a cold emotional nature. You see this? Is it making sense?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I want you to learn the vocabulary of the planets. That's why I give you so much material, and I want you to study, read every day, absorb it, suck it up, you know? You'll find that you'll get greater talent as you learn the language. And when you look at something, you don't just say moon emotions, you say, oh, well, moon mother, moon womb. You see what I mean? Womb. The moon will mean so much more than just a couple things to you. It'll mean a lot. It'll mean relationship very often emotionally with other people. The mother, the wife it can be, okay? You know, Venus is not necessarily the wife, the mother. My wife is my mother as well as my wife. You know what I mean? She's the nurturer, my nurturer. And so, you know, I know I've been difficult to live with because I got a grand cross on my moon. But I got Venus and Jupiter and Neptune on that cross, so it's not so bad. Where if Mars was there, or Saturn on that cross would be worse. It just shows, you know, that, let's not get on my chart.
Keep going.
It's okay to talk about your chart, but no, seriously. So, but, you know, when you look at a chart, and I was talking about looking at the mitigating factors in a chart. I have a grand cross, but also Jupiter's on that cross. And many times I've told you as well, you resurrect off your cross, right? But, and Jupiter is very forgiving. Saturn's not. Jupiter's Jesus. He forgives you your sins, right? So Jupiter is forgiveness. Saturn is, I'll hold it against you forever. You see? So when you have Jupiter on a cross, I mean, it's kind of like even my life of crime when I was a young man, and I was, you know, in prison and went through those. I was given a lot of forgiveness, even by the parole board. You know, people would say, "You're lucky, Ron. You should have never got out of prison." You know, I was wanted in New York, Maryland, Virginia, Ohio, Texas, Michigan. I could have served the rest of my life in prison. But the point being, I was very fortunate. But more fortunate than that, I used those years for something good. And good came out of it for other people because I learned a lot and gained a lot of knowledge. You know, so again, let's go back to the theme here. Moon to Venus, like I just mentioned, I have a cross for that. It can show conflict in what? Relationships, Venus. Okay? Emotional instability. Okay? Moon to Jupiter. Okay? Now, Moon to Jupiter is interesting. Again, I have that cross with Moon to Jupiter. It can be over-emotional, it can be over-expansive, it can be over-optimistic. I would say I'm an over-optimistic person. You know, I believe all things work together for good. It was easy for me to buy that. Okay? And I've lived it. I teach it. Because emotionally, I'm geared to that. I mean, it's easy for me to grab onto that concept. So, Jupiter was called Optimum Maximus in the ancient days. Optimum Maximus. So, optimum is like optimism. It's open, optics, open, and Maximus to open up maximally. A person that has Jupiter aspects in a chart strong generally has a lot of eye dilation. They're very future oriented. If you read my book, there's a little chapter on eyes and the light. It's important you read the book. It'll give you a wealth of information about your astrology and about yourself, quite frankly. But Jupiter's, but see, I have it on a cross, so I sometimes am over-optimistic. You know, I start projects I'm sure I'm going to be successful at, and it's like, oh. My wife says, you did this, it looks great, but what are we going to do with it? I said, I don't know. You know, she always asks me that. You know, I put together a beautiful website for my photography. She said, what are you going to do with it? I don't know. I started a panoramic business. She said, what are you going to do with it? I don't know. You know, I'm real good at the visualization and concept idea, right? Some of the things I've done have been very successful, but the point being that, you know, I got Venus on the cross, I got Jupiter on that cross, and I've got the Moon, and I've got Neptune, all of those things on the cross.
Wow.
So, you know, but I also have Jupiter on a grand trine to my Sun and Pluto, and Mercury, Sun, Mercury, Pluto. So that same Jupiter that's getting a crucifixion is on a great grand trine, rather, which is very powerful. So that's what I mean about look at the whole chart. As you start doing charts, you know, you're going to see squares and oppositions and crosses, and you say, oh my gosh, this is a lot of crosses here. Then all of a sudden you say, well, but look at it, it's trying to this and trying to that. So there's a way out of that crucifying energy. All right, so Moon to Jupiter can be over-optimistic. Can be, because Jupiter is your future view. It's the way you see and think about what's going to be. So if you have Moon afflicting Jupiter, for example, that means the mother may be a factor in somehow sabotaging your future. I could say that of my mother. She was married 9 times. She didn't raise me. She put me in boarding homes where I was abused. I went through a lot of bad experiences because of my mother, who wanted to be a play lady and a party girl and a beautiful, beautiful woman. And she attracted a lot of men and relationships, but her life was that. It wasn't about me and my sister. So the Moon Jupiter can affect what? Your future. Can have an effect on the way you see and the way you grow and the way you mature. Especially when you think about this as your formative. Remember what I said about the Moon? Formative. Good. What'd you say? Formative years.
Formative years.
Good. So my formative years were pretty screwed up. And my future looked pretty bleak. And my behavior as I matured took a very angry turn of misbehavior. But if you see that, you can start to say, wow, you know, there's something went on as a child. You must have went through some rough times. So, okay, so how about the Moon and the Sun? What do you think that represents?
Mother and father.
Conflict.
Good, good, good. Mother, father. But remember, the Sun is the good father, kind of. It's the father that's spiritual kind of father. Saturn is the stern father. I told you in my son's chart, he has, his sun opposes Saturn. And his will against any kind of discipline is unbelievable. I mean, he is so strong. He's Leo anyway. But he was an amazing kid. There was a couple times where I wanted to spank him. And I'd take him to his room and because that's how I was raised, get a few butts. That kid, I could not tie him down enough to hold him. He fought me with such strength. And even as a child, And that wasn't the wrong thing to do, but it's, it was my misbehavior. But the point being, I was up against a will that was stronger than mine. Even as a young child, he was that way. I admire him so much. He's a beautiful boy. So he's carried that into other areas of his life. He's a very successful young man. But the point I'm getting at is that the sun, moon oppositions or squares or semi-squares represent a conflict between what? Help me with it.
You want to do something and you don't do it.
Your will.
Your
Good.
Yourself and will.
Good, that's what we're
You
getting
don't
at. Will.
feel like doing it.
Good. The will and the feelings are in conflict, right?
Mm-hmm.
So anybody's got that aspect, is going to have to constantly deal with what? A conflict between will, and particularly it often comes out to be involving things that are, the moon, by the way, I missed one key word of the moon. Moon's your habits. So if will's in conflict with habits, what do you think that affects, particularly the nurturing moon? Eating, overweight, constantly dealing with, I'm going to go on another diet, and then not doing it, okay? So what happens with this is the conflict of the will and emotions, the feelings and the emotions. I feel like it, but I am not going to do it, I don't have the willpower to do it. I can't change, okay? It's me, I'm just going to have to stay like this. This is the way I am. So that is kind of like quick idea, just one indicators of the moon to all the planets. You should be able to do that already. So you pick up a person's chart, and whether friends or loved ones or whatever, you can kind of go look at those things and talk about them, discuss them. And then maybe even start counseling eventually. That's where you want to end up. It's not about just looking at this stuff, it's about guiding people above and beyond it, okay? Kathy sent me a beautiful email about Edgar Casey, and how Edgar Casey had said about astrology that many people that do astrology or are involved in astrology are misguided because they don't realize that will is ever the ruler. Something like that. Do you have that down? Do you have that with you?
No, I don't think I do.
Okay. So I wrote her, it's on my, if it's on my, my gift for you, we posted her, we didn't post your name on there, but I posted a response to a student that had asked me about Edgar Casey's work. And Edgar Casey says very clearly, astrology is definitely a value to study. And it's important to study it, but not to forget that will is ever the ruler. And that the planets shouldn't rule you, you should rule them. And one of the things I've learned in life is that, that's all wonderful if you're really walking on that level of a master, that you're actually now controlling and mastering your own destiny by your will. That's wonderful. But few people do. That's why they need to understand those things in their chart so they can begin to work on those areas. It's not about whether or not you can exercise your will. It's do you exercise your will? Most people don't. Okay. So, yes?
It's kind of off the wall, but what about people that don't, like, my husband has maybe one square in his whole chart. Now, does that mean they're like further along, in their evolution, or, they don't have to be like brought back as many times because they don't have all these opposition? Or do we just like, some lives we just choose to like fight the dragon more so than others are?
That's a good question. I really would have to see the whole chart of his chart, because there may be aspects in there. Do you have his chart in your hand there?
I don't have.
Okay. Because I'd like to see if there's only one square in that chart, because there's, but even
But in general,
going back to the chart, I think I did your husband's chart, didn't I?
Yeah.
What's his name?
Larry.
Didn't I do it or look
Yes,
at it?
you did.
Huh?
Yes. I don't know if exactly he has one. I was just asking in general.
No, I know it's
If
good.
you have a lot, some people have a lot of aspects opposing and, trines, and then other people it just seems like they don't really have much of anything on there.
Yeah, I've seen charts with no squares and no oppositions and no stress aspects. Generally what happens with that is, quite frankly, there's a bit of, sometimes very a lot of laziness with that, okay? The couch potato guy, you know, they just don't want to get off the couch. The reason being that there's nothing stressing, there's nothing driving, there's nothing challenging that person. And I see squares and oppositions as positive energies that makes for strength. Strength of character and other things. I don't see them only as negative. You know, I've said to you many times, I'd never want to bless my own children with the Irish blessing, which is, may the sun always rise, you know, be on your face, may the road rise up to meet you, you've always seen that Irish blessing. To me, that would be a curse. Why would you want to have a child brought up as a weakling? Because if you have no challenges, you have nothing, you know. It's like, for example, a chart that has no aspect between Mars and the destiny ruler. Your destiny ruler is important. It's the rising signs, the planet that rules your rising sign or your ascendant. Okay, if you don't know what it is, I'll tell you. Just tell me what your rising sign is. So if it's Sagittarius, it means your rising sign is Pisces, or it's Sagittarius. If you've got Capricorn rising, that means that Saturn is your destiny planet. If you know, so whatever planet rules that sign rising is called your destiny planet. Now, if you, Percy John Newton taught me this, and that's something I've kept over the years. He said, anyone that has no aspect between their, I don't always give this out because I'm afraid I'm going to offend somebody, because if they don't have that aspect, they're going to say, oh, wrong. My gosh, what am I going to do? But it wasn't the most best positive reading of it, but if you didn't have some aspect between the destiny planet Mars or the sun in the chart, it can mean that you'll never achieve a lot in life. There's not enough drive, not enough ambition, there's not enough force to move you, to get you doing things. So often that's the case. I don't know whether it's in one of my books. I could read it to you exactly what he wrote to me years ago, but I've noticed this is true. So you want to have some aspect to from Mars. Mars is a good. What planet is square in his chart, by the way?
I mean, I just was using it as an
No, I know.
example.
Okay.
I don't.
Okay.
I don't really even know. I have.
All right.
I mean, I've been too busy studying my own chart.
That's okay. It's okay.
When I figured mine out.
I think I remember I looked at his chart once for you, didn't I?
Yes.
And I said that he has very little patience for this kind of stuff. Didn't I tell you that?
Probably. Well, that's true. I mean, you just said that he's ready for a big fall, and I kind of know what that is. Financial, you know, it's like something's going to go boom. What was it in the past that he really made a mistake?
Yeah.
I think financial or whatever. And he probably, you know, he may have
I
prostate
remember I
cancer.
saw that in his chart. You know, he's going to go through some very rough bumps here. But I also realized that if I recall right, I saw a strong computer, and what was it I saw? Something to do with his career, his work or something. And whatever, enough of that. But the whole, yes.
Yeah, when you were talking about Mars and the destiny planet, did you mean a stress aspect or anything?
Any aspect.
Any aspect,
Yeah,
okay.
any aspect, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So does this help a little bit? Mm-hmm. Okay. And you know, how many of you can look at your own chart and tell me what aspect you have of the moon that might be an affliction? Huh?
Have
Okay.
the moon square Pluto, a tight square. I think that's keeping too much in and then exploding sometimes.
It's kind of like a Mars energy, very Pluto, yeah, it is. Pluto and Mars are somewhat similar. Pluto Mars deals with a lot of issues that, you know, I mean, Moon Pluto rather aspects. It's not as easy to define. Let me tell you the planets that are hard to define in a chart, even for me, and I've been doing this for years, are Pluto and Neptune and Uranus.
Yes.
Aren't they? You know that, don't you? They're very hard to give a definition because they're such universal energies. Their energy is so much less personal than the Mars, Venus, and Saturn, and Jupiter.
Yeah, the trans-Saturnian
Huh?
planets. The trans-Saturn planets.
Exactly, yeah. Those are a little harder to define and give a meaning to. But I would have to look at the whole chart to really enlarge on that. Very often with Pluto aspects to the moon, there's some issues sometimes with female problems, okay? That can be that because that's the moon, the mother, the moon. and Pluto, it can be a crisis of some kind. The moon, Pluto can be an emotional crisis or it can be physical crisis. What would make it more likely to be a physical crisis? Can anybody tell me?
Mars.
Good, but what would this Pluto and the moon make it more physical meaning?
The house or
I
the
was
sign.
thinking the house.
No?
I-
Well, it
the
could.
house.
It could, yeah. It could if it's angular. But it's, remember the cardinals.
Oh, yeah.
The cardinal crosses, the cardinal squares, the cardinal energies are more physical, right? The mutable are what?
They go with the flow.
More
Huh?
changeable, flexible.
Changeable.
Good.
Flexible.
More mental.
Mental.
Yeah, you think about it. There's Sagittarius, which is
Uh-huh.
Jupiter's planet, which is
Gemini.
Gemini,
Pisces.
Virgo, and Pisces.
Pisces.
You know, it's not so physical.
Mhm.
The Aries, the cardinal signs,
Right.
like Cancer and Libra and Capricorn, can be very physical in what they deal to you. Okay, so, you know, you need to know not only the aspect, but what sign are they in. Okay? So, you know, that's, anytime you deal with squares and oppositions, remember you're dealing with the cardinal or the fixed or the mutable crosses. They have to be in one of those signs. The mutable, the fixed, or the cardinal. They have to be if they're squaring each other. Okay? Right? Because they're forming across each other. All right? And all the cardinal signs are what? Are square or opposition to each other. So you can get more information that way. Now you have the house now. After you did that, you mentioned houses. Now you can look at the houses.
Mhm.
The 1st and the 7th and the 10th and the 4th are going to be much more like cardinal, aren't they?
Mhm.
So you add all that together and all of a sudden you've synthesized it into a meaning. It's got much more power. Somebody else got a moon aspect to anything? Yes,
I also have my moon square my Venus
square Venus.
and square in a T square with Uranus.
Okay.
So everything that happens suddenly sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. And see, that's that is a lot of emotional stress in your life
Mhm.
dealing with relationships. Okay. And conflicts in relationships and sudden unexpected breakups. That's what.
I mean, I will share this because I don't mind. My mother was a very unstable person,
Very much like
so
that.
she was not available to me. And then I bonded very much with my grandmother and my grandfather. And when Cuba came, it was gone.
When who came?
Cuba, Castro. And
Oh, yeah.
I left the country. It was like gone, just like that. You
Wow,
know.
sudden unexpected.
Mhm.
Wow, amazing.
And that's happened to me occasionally with teachers, with girlfriends. Suddenly gone.
Yeah, that's so like that chart,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Mhm.
See, now that's what I mean about seeing yourself and understanding your own chart
Yeah.
and being able to understand the meanings. That really is insightful. And you've been studying astrology. You know, Martha, I really encourage you. I've said that to you before, but you know, you have a gift. You know, you need to nurture it.
I will. I
It's
will.
like it's my water. My
And I
wife
really
doesn't.
want to thank you for that support.
Okay, but my wife doesn't go out and water those plants; they're going to die, right? You know. So you need to do the same thing. You keep
But
watering
what I
your
said, I didn't because I wasn't mature enough. Again, part of that was that to see
Yeah.
anything but the negativity in my chart, and I
Yeah.
said, forget this, forget this. I'm
Yeah.
not going to keep looking at that.
Yeah, well, you have, if I recall right, you have Capricorn rising.
Oh, I'm Capricorn
Yeah,
all over the place.
Capricorn all
Capricorn
over.
and Saturn.
Anybody that has Capricorn or Saturn rising on the first house has self-image, big self-image problems. Because Saturn and Capricorn is I am not, I can't, I won't, you know, I'm not. It's more I can't, I am not, I'm not worth anything. It's devalues, it's Saturn saying you're not worth anything.
And I'll tell you what was really helpful because I spent so many years blaming my family for that. And when I finally looked at my chart honestly, I said, you know what? You were born to learn that lesson. So stop blaming them.
Good for you. Because see, that's also the accusing.
Uh-huh.
Because when you're feeling worthless, you're going to find others to blame.
Yeah.
It's not my fault I'm this way, it's your fault because you did this or that and the other. And that's Saturn's energy. Saturn is the accuser of our brethren.
But Saturn's also the teacher.
He's a teacher, exactly. So, you know, I was, when I wrote my last version of my book, which is now on Amazon, and I added a chapter or two, but I revised some of it. And one of the things that I concluded was, I understood why the early Christians and some of the groups that had studied and taught and went off on their own were persecuted by the Christian groups because they were considered satanic worshipers.
The early Christians.
Well, there was groups all throughout time that have been considered to be Satan worshippers. Now, there are people that claim to be Satan worshippers that worship that and all that. That's another story. But what I realized was that Saturn has three uses, has three meanings. One is it's, because you remember if you've read my book, how many have read my book?
I'm halfway through it.
Okay.
Part of it.
Okay. So when you read my book, you'll learn all this. But Saturn was the use of the generative energy. Remember, Saturn is Peter, the rock. I got my rocks. Peter, cock, crow thrice, I shall deny me 3 times. All that was related to this. Okay. So when Peter and Christ said, "Get behind me, Satan," to Peter. Okay. Peter, upon this rock I'll build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. The gates of hell are right here. Okay? Peter, upon this rock I'll build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. Whatsoever thou shalt bind on earth, that's binding up that energy, not releasing it, shall be bound where? In heaven. Whatsoever thou shalt loose on earth shall be lost where? In heaven. Heaven's within you, it says in Scripture. So where is it coming from? So when we get into that, we're talking about the early Christians' disciples of sexual regeneration, of raising up that energy. When the woman with the issue of blood of 12 years touched the hem of Christ's garment, what did he say? Who touched me? I behold, virtue has gone out of me. Virtue means the sexual virtuousness. A virtuous woman is a woman that's not sexual, not using that energy. So, I behold, virtue has gone out of me. The disciples said, if you read it, it talks in there. It says, I desire that you all be abstinent, and none of you. But if you're going to, rather than burn in hell, it's better that you have a woman. If you're going to be struggling with it, it's better you marry than to be battling that all the time. But if it's not all men, it's not given to all men to become eunuchs of God. Meaning what? Eunuchs, they used to cut off the.
Right.
Okay, so what is it? What are we talking about? We're talking about the sexual energy. So Saturn is the regenerative energy if it's used this way. It's a generation of children this way. Okay? It's degenerate if it's used in the wrong way. Okay? So if it's not done in love, it's degenerative. You see what I mean? It's like pleasure can bring a lot of pain,
Right.
but it's not necessarily love. Okay? There's a difference between that. You go through our life living that. What is it, Zeus?
This has a company.
Oh, somebody, the
Our
dog.
little dog.
She comes over and knocks on our
She was
door.
looking right in the window
Yeah,
for
she
him.
wants to play with Zeus.
And he was lying.
I'm gonna let Zeus out, honey.
By himself?
Yeah, he
That
goes
little
play.
bitty dog wants to play with him.
You go play. Go play. Want to go play?
He had like telepathy. He wasn't even looking at the
I know,
dog.
aren't they amazing?
Look at that face.
He's one of the most telepathic dogs.
Look at that face. He is.
Oh, the poor baby.
They're the best buddies.
So cute.
Wow.
Amazing animals. Yeah, isn't it funny how he knows?
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, like if we're going to go somewhere and we're not going to take him, he knows. Let him come to the door. He lays over and just looks at us. And yet if we're going to take him, he seems to know that too. He reads your mind.
Right.
He's an amazing animal. So anyway, so we're talking about Saturn. Saturn is, if you raise the serpent on the staff, that's what the early Christians had as a symbol.
Right.
There's actually old crosses that show the serpent on the cross, and that's the Kundalini force of the raising up on the spine into the higher chakric levels. Okay, and that brings a different consciousness. Okay, but
So
Anyway.
the 3 meanings are what?
generation, regeneration, or degeneration. It's all the generative energies. I wonder if that's where the word genitals come from. Generative energies. Genitals.
Generation, regeneration.
And degeneration.
Degeneration.
That's the energies that are Saturn. So Saturn can be any of those things. It can be, in our life. But we need to understand that and understand that. Let me put some. Okay. We're going to keep working on this. I want to get some things up here. Okay. Anybody want to get a drink or take a little
It could be like good, bad, or.
good, bad, and ugly?
Okay, yeah, we should get,
I copied them,
you copy them?
Huh?
That's what I was trying to find.
Maybe Ron can
What?
make a couple of copies. Yes.
Oh, no, it's okay. Let's go.
I still have problems with,
You see,
and others in the aspects.
Uh-huh,
I'm looking at my moon.
uh-huh.
My moon is trine, right?
if you need anything to drink, it's a good time to get some. Got some fresh sun-made iced tea here, made outside.
And that's really
Is that, what is that, Sarah? Is that part of fortune, or
Between what?
might be something he's
It's
not
fortune,
using?
yeah.
Very
You know
good.
what, he doesn't really use that.
Yeah, it's,
So
The computer put that one out, was that a
Saturn,
short
the
fortune,
moon,
but I don't
good
think he really
aspect.
used that.
so is emotional stability.
Doesn't mean that
It's
you
very
can't
good.
read about it and see what it
It
means.
gives a good foundation
Definitely good.
of
Taurus is also
But like
on
even-
your chart, so that's good.
really the right, the Saturn is valued. Okay. So means the right use of the emotional side of your life. You have a good
my sun
ground.
square
I don't know what the other aspects are in that.
Take your
chart, but
Saturn.
I'm just talking about that
is
one.
Saturn.
Uh-huh.
So,
Also,
Yeah.
in Pluto.
so we'll look at that. We're gonna, everybody's
Could be
gonna have
That should be,
time to
that should
go.
be, your sun and moon square Saturn, right?
Sun and moon square.
I have the same thing, yeah, and then your,
And where
what
does it show here?
do you mean, where's it show?
I mean, I have my moon. I'm looking for the,
Are you looking at a progression here, or is this your?
no, that's me.
That's your regular,
That's my
okay,
natal, yeah.
okay. And you want to see where it shows here, is that what you mean?
Or does it?
What sun,
Right.
your sun is, your
Yes.
sun is here, okay, so it's
In
Pisces,
Pisces.
and then your Saturn is
But
Okay.
you need to know.
by Aries, yeah, so that's, you see that's 90 degrees, 30, 60, 90. Yeah. So your sun is squaring, so I have the same thing, it's just, yep. It's definitely challenging. I think it's usually younger years when it's your Saturn,
Yeah,
right? But you
Yeah.
have it tough
Yeah.
younger?
Yeah.
Me too.
yeah.
And you got out of it, you got through it, you worked through it.
I'm working through it.
Yeah, I know. It's always work, right? Yeah, but so you see that now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
María,
So that's your sun.
ustedes son amigas, ¿no?
Ajá.
Dame tu número de teléfono porque ella tiene el mío, pero yo no tengo el de
What
ustedes.
else?
¿Ustedes vienen
You
juntas
have
o
your
no?
moon here.
My moon
Si
is
fueras tan amable, dame esa información. Sí, pero ella quiere tener unas clases para que si yo tengo noticias de ustedes, para comunicarse con ustedes. Y el nombre de ambas de ustedes, sí, 305.
You also have your sun from Mars. I have mine, my conjunct, so it's that's challenging.
98, 82, es
square,
clínico.
that's challenging. Sí, yo tengo
Yeah, any
que
squares you have difficulties and challenges.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then
Sí,
when
pero
they
yo te digo
conjunct,
porque la gente muchas veces dice que
Conjunction,
van
I
a
think
hacer
is a
cosas
little
y
bit better,
luego...
but it's not.
a ella le encanta
Yeah, I think it's
Sueña con eso,
a
pero
question with conjunctions,
Yeah,
but
she's
they're definitely
definitely-
not as bad. Oppositions are
pero
challenging.
es interesante.
Oppositions aren't as bad as a square though. An opposition is, like he was talking about
Ah,
the
son
sun
números
and moon
diferentes.
opposing.
Ajá.
Like my
El
sun and
celular.
moon oppose
El
each
celular
other.
de
Ya, pero
ambas.
ahora llamas ahí, y yo tengo el tuyo 978,
Actually, your sun is in Pisces now, so Libra, that's.
7597893.
Very torsion.
Perdón, lo digo tanto mucho
No,
en inglés
that
que en español.
No, it's the homes, the
Si no, lo tengo que traducir.
Tienes que traducir como me decir.
Me cuesta más.
Yeah,
Where is it when